You ever find the perfect sample, but no matter what you try, you just can't add to it? It's frustrating. You know the beat needs more, but everything you try just sounds off. So turning that perfect sample into a finished beat feels impossible. Well, today I'm going to share a simple framework for adding to your samples. It's called the suitcase framework. It's easy to learn, and once you know it, adding to your samples becomes so much easier. My name is Navie. I've been making sampled beats for over 15 years, which have been used by platinum artists and have gotten millions of streams, and today I'm going to explain how this simple framework works. So you have your sample, you've built a great sounding loop with it, and now it needs more. At this point, you probably start thinking about what to add. Maybe you start going through your sample library or opening up plugin presets looking for a cool sound that jumps out to you. And already, doing this might be why you struggle. So let me explain why. Think of it like this. Let's say you're going on a trip and it was time to pack your suitcase. What would you add inside? Well, what if you started by throwing in your entire cool collection of sneakers because they were your favorite? Shoe after shoe, they start piling up and your suitcase just fills up fast. You'd probably agree that this is a bad approach, right? Well, this is similar to adding to your samples and only thinking about what feels exciting or cool. But now let's think. Instead, you only pack one pair of cool shoes. Then you start adding in what you actually need, like socks and shirts and your toothbrush. Now you're actually ready for your trip. And this is exactly how it works when adding to your sample. Instead of choosing what to add by looking for sounds that feel cool, think about what your sample actually needs. This is a better place to start. But you might be thinking, how do you know what your sample actually needs? Is there an easy way to figure this out? Well, you can break this down into two parts. One, we need to think about what sounds to add, and two, we need to think about what patterns to build. I know this sounds easier said than done, so I'll show you how to do this plus some key ideas that you might be missing. And to show you this, I will make two beats using two different samples and just go step by step here. So let's start off with sample one that I will use for beat number one. A jazz sample full of great sounding keys. So let's bring this into our beat and chop it up quick and build a loop. And I want to say, in case you're not sure how to do these basic first steps of chopping up samples and you need help with that, I'll link a separate video at the end of this one to help you solve this problem. But if you're good with this, let's start by thinking about the first key piece, how to know what sounds to add to your sample. And where you can start is by thinking about the shapes of the sounds inside of your sample. Every sound has a shape to it. We have transient sounds that are short and the sound stops playing almost right away. And we have sustained sounds that will continue to play for much longer. And all sounds fit somewhere on this graph. Some sounds play for a short time and others for a long time. And this is one idea you should listen for when using a sample, because it can help you know exactly what sounds to add. To help you understand this, let's go back and listen to our sample once again, and this time, try to hear the shapes of the sounds within the samples. So we can hear that the keys in the sample don't actually last that long. Even looking at the waveform of the sample, we can see the sounds here fade, so the sounds in the sample lean towards being more transient. Now to practice this a bit more, let's look at another example. This time I'll take this weird sample of a guy playing glasses, and once again I'll create a loop using this sample. And this is a good example of a sample that has more sustained sounds. Yes, we do have sounds in this sample that are a bit more transient that sit up top, but if you listen closely, there's this one thick sustained sound that is constantly playing throughout this loop. And again, when we look at the sample visually, we don't see any of those same fades here. The shape of the sample is more sustained. Now you might be thinking, why does this matter? How does the shape of the sounds affect what sounds that you're gonna add? Well, let's go back to the suitcase idea to explain this. If you pack your suitcase with one big tall pair of boots, that means there's gonna be less room left over for other stuff. And the same is true for your beat. The more sustained sounds there are in the sample, the less room there will be for your sounds. So if that's the case, if your sample is full of sustained sounds, it will be smarter to try to add more shorter, transient sounds into your beat, because that's all you're gonna have room left for. But if instead you start by packing your suitcase with a thin pair of slippers, now look, there's plenty of room for other stuff. And again, the same is true for your beat. If your sample has more transient sounds in it, this leaves room open for you to be more flexible and bring in ideas that you like. And this is why the shape of the sounds inside of your sample are so important. It's a big reason why one sound will fit and another won't. But there's a second key idea that's important other than shape. If we go back to our first sample and take a look at the frequencies, you can see that most of the sample sits in this one region here. We do have these bells that play briefly in the sample that sit in the higher frequency, but that's about it. Everything else mostly sits down here. Whereas if you look at sample number 2, a lot more frequencies are taken up a lot more broadly, and these frequencies are much louder as well. And this is yet another idea that we should think about when choosing what sounds to add, the frequency of the sample. The less frequencies a sample takes up, the more room is left for us to fill. So those are two key ideas that you need to think about when choosing sounds to add to your sample. The shape of the sounds in the sample and the frequencies of the sounds in the sample. So back to our beat. Since sample 1 is so much more open and has a lot more room, both in terms of the shapes of the sounds and the frequencies of the sample itself, let's start by choosing this sound here as our first sound that we'll add. And to help these sounds fit a bit better, I can use reshaping tools. For example, we have this decay knob down here, and if I turn it down, you'll notice the note gets shorter and shorter and it becomes more transient. So if your sample doesn't have as much room, you can take the sounds that you're trying to add and just shorten them. This can help them fit better. And the same thing is true for the frequencies of the sounds. You can just cut certain pockets out. Next, let's move on to the second step to add to your sample. Now that we have a sound that we can add, we need to think about what pattern to build with it. So again, how do we do this? Is there an easy way to figure this out? Well, this is where listening to the movement in your sample is a good place to start. So let's listen back to this sample once again. And this time, listen for what parts of the sample that we've used have movement, meaning which parts have more notes playing. So it sounds like during this middle part of the first chop, we have a lot of movement happening here. We have those upward notes playing close to each other. But then other than that, we have a lot less movement, fewer notes playing, and a lot more openness. So this will help me decide where I want to build my patterns. Starting by building patterns in parts of the sample that have less movement can be a good idea. Otherwise, you risk cluttering your beat. Now let's think about what pattern to build. So here I'm using Note Grabber. This is a plugin that maps out your entire sample and shows you every single note inside. And you can also use this like a blueprint to build patterns around your sample. If you want to try Note Grabber, you can for free. I'll leave a link to this in the description box below. I built this plugin, so I'm 100% biased. I love this and I use it in every single beat. But you can do everything I'm about to show you by ear and hand if you'd like. It's entirely up to you and what you want to use to build your patterns. So looking at the sample, it's like I said before, this middle part of the first chop has more movement. We have these notes up here. Outside of that, there's a lot less happening in the sample overall. So these outside areas is where I will build my patterns. Next, let's figure out what notes we should use for our actual pattern by just seeing what the notes are inside the sample. So here we have an F, an E, a B. Over here we have an F sharp, and down here we have a C. And this should be enough to start building a pattern. So let's try this. What if after this high movement area, we built a little melodic idea that starts at an F, then to an E, down to a C, up again to an E, and then finally down to a B. And again, to build this, I'm merely using the notes that I know exist in the sample from earlier. And from here, I actually built Note Grabber to let you preview your ideas alongside your sample. So I'll turn on this DAW preview button and then hit play inside of my DAW. And this pattern sounds great to me, so let's use it. I'll just take this pattern and bring it into my piano roll for my bell sound that I picked out earlier. And this works perfectly. So let's continue building more patterns for this beat. Let's bring in some low end in next. I'll grab this thick, dense bass sound here. And to go back to what I mentioned earlier, this bass has a sustained shape to it. It's thick and full, but that's okay. Since my sample is more on the transient side, a thick sound like this still has room. So now let's figure out what note to use. We have a lot to choose from. So I'll listen to how each note sounds as my loop is playing. Alright, out of all these, I feel like E fits the best. So that's exactly what I'll use for my bass pattern. Now I do want to point out one thing. When it comes to building patterns, you might be wondering whether it is a good idea to simply copy and paste the exact pattern from your sample. For example, what if I simply just trace over some of these notes and use them for my beat? Well, what we're doing here is layering. We're taking ideas that already exist in the sample and basically emphasizing them. This can be a great way of getting your overall beat to sound more full and more detailed, but you're not adding any new ideas into the beat. There's nothing new musically or rhythmically that the sample isn't already doing. So let's take a listen here. The sample feels more full now, which works. I do like the idea of thickening up the beat this way. So from here, I'm going to keep doing the same process over and over, picking sounds that I know will fit by thinking about the shape and the frequency, and building patterns that I know will work by thinking about movement. So in the second half of this loop, which I felt was far more open, I added this organ. As well, I found this other sound from the exact same sample and layered it in as well. And now all that's needed are drums to finish this beat. And there we go. By using this simple framework, I was able to add multiple sounds to this sample and create a full beat idea. And to get more practice in, let's work on our second beat and use the exact same framework. To start, this is the sound that I will use. Now, as you might have noticed, this sound leans a bit more towards the sustained side. It plays for a pretty long time, which might be a problem since my sample already has sustained sounds in it. So to help prevent this from cluttering up my beat, I will play this using shorter notes from my actual pattern. This is yet another way to help your sounds that you choose actually fit in. It's how you play them. But we need to figure out where to build this pattern when listening to the sample loop again and focusing on how much movement there is. The sample has a lot of movement going on, so I'm going to be a lot more conservative with my pattern and build something with a lot less movement. And you'll notice this beat is already feeling pretty full with just this one pattern. So next I'll add in a bass line. And at this point, I think all the beat needs are drums and we're probably finished. And again, to build these patterns for my beat, I use Note Grabber, which you can try for free by clicking this box over here. But that is a framework that you can use to add to your samples. Like I mentioned before though, if you struggle way before this and you get stuck chopping up your samples, click this video that's next to me and yeah, click one of these two things. Come on, man, click something.